Yeah, good morning, everyone. So, yesterday we learned about looping and iteration statements related some points. And while working with looping and iteration statements, difference I told you. What is difference between loop and iteration? Difference between loop and iteration is loop requires a condition, initialization, and a counter. Iterations doesn't require that, right? So how to use iterators for of they are iterate loops are you can use for, you can use while, or you can use do while. So yesterday I explained for while and do while, when to use them. Simple point I will show you. So while loop is nothing but it is used when number of iterations will change dynamically. If number of iterations are standard, then we use for. Yesterday I told you that if number of iterations are changing dynamically, then better to use while. But what happens is while it checks the suitable condition and then executes statements. Then what happens is statements will run only when condition is true. So that is actually while loop. That means we syntactically write like this: while we have a condition, and here we are defining some counter, and then statements. Then we have to define like this. That means the statements will execute until the condition is satisfied. For that we have to use a while. Generally, how do we write that while loop? Suppose we are writing like this. So where I is equal to some 1. So while condition is I less than or equal to 10. What we have to do? Document dot write, print the value of I. After that, I plus plus increment. That means now what it will do? First it will print I value, which is 1. After that it will increase I plus 1. That means 2. After 2 it will verify is the condition satisfying. If satisfying, it will print 2. After that again 3, like that. This is a simple approach of writing the loops. Later in examples you can try them. Now what happens if I value is 11? Then if condition is not matching, it will not start the statements. That means statements will execute only when condition is true. If condition is false, it cannot execute the statements. This is generally while loop. So as a developer, when to use while loop? When we are not sure about number of iterations, and iteration counter may change dynamically. Then at that time we have to go with while. Now same actually. So this is the example. Similarly, we have do while also. So do while. Do while actually it is similar to while loop, but what is the point is it executes statements at least once, even when the condition is false. Even when the condition is false, the statements will execute at least once. So generally syntax how we have to first write do. We need to define this do, and we have to define statements, and if necessary counter, and here we have to write while and condition. Condition is defined here. Many times in interviews, if anyone asks what is difference between while and do while, many times people give this as answer, like in while we check condition first, in do while we check condition last. That is not good answer. So where you are checking the condition is not the point. So what is difference is while will execute statements only when condition is true, but do while will execute statements even when the condition is false, and it will execute at least once. So how do we write that? So here I am writing, so where I is equal to 1, do and the statement, so is document dot write I plus br and I plus plus increment, and while I less than or equal to 10. That means here we are defining the condition. Now you can see it is going to print the value 1 to 10. Now important is here when you are dealing with this I is 11, what will happen is even when the condition is not satisfying, it will execute at least once. Actually, screen, right. One second. Okay, right. So here it is going to print the statements at least once. So even when the condition is false, the statement will execute at least once. That is what do while is. So we have to use them in different occasions, in different examples. We will see how to work with them. I will give one task you try. So for this, which is a regular task in real-time projects, one task I will give you here. You try that. So the task for you is actually, so the task is you have to create a screen, let's say, yeah. So here we will take input from the user. So we will take input from the user like some enter pin. So here we are giving your pin, right? And for that we will provide a text box so that user can enter pin, a text box, and we will give a submit option. Now what you have to do is, so user will enter the pin. So some pin user enters. You maintain separate data. In the data is an object. In that object, so you have a pin. Pin is some pin number we have. Now what happens when user clicks submit? It should verify whether pin is matching or not. And if not matching, then it should say invalid pin. That is a very simple logic. Everybody can try that. That means it should say invalid pin. If it is not matching, invalid pin. But what is the point is, like then what he will do, he will enter another pin again. Like that, it should allow only 3 times. If 3 times wrong pin is entered, then it should show a message like card blocked. It should show a message card blocked. That means it should say invalid pin and 2 attempts left. Again they entered. That means it should say invalid pin, 1 attempt left. Again they entered wrong. Then it should say invalid pin blocked. That means 3 times it can verify. If 3 times wrong pin is entered, then it should show invalid. 3 finished, then it should block. So this you have to design by using any looping statement. You can use while, you can use do while, or you can use for. This is very frequently asked task in even MNC level interviews for testing logical skills. So you try that. Concept understood? That means it should show invalid pin 3 attempts. After the 3 attempts, 4th attempt is also invalid, then it should block. So you need to write a loop for that and verify. Try that. Otherwise, I will explain in class how to do that. But first you should try to do this kind of task. This is one task for you, right? Looping. You have to write by using looping, right? By using looping statements, you have to design it. That means 3 times it is to repeat now. Enter pin 3 times. You have to try that. So try that. If you are unable, then I will explain. So these are all under, this is verify pin 3 times max, then block, right? That is one. So this is all looping and iteration statements. So what are the looping statements available? So looping statements we have for, we have while, and we have do while. So what are iteration statements available? So iterations we have for in, we have for of. These two already we learned. For in is for reading all properties. For of is for reading all values. Already we saw that while working with arrays. That is for in and for of. So these are iteration statements. Next important, jump statements. Jump statements already we know. Jump statements are nothing but we already worked with break. We already worked with return. So, and we have another is continue. So break, return, and continue. What is difference between break and return? Last session we learned. Both are jump statements only. In switch we discussed that we can use break or we can use return. What is difference between break and return? Break will terminate the block, but still it is compiling the logic. So return will terminate the block and stop the compilers. Stop the compiling. That means it comes out of the script. Yesterday, practically also we saw that. So you can use either break or you can use return. Already several examples we saw on that. Now, what is continue? Continue is nothing but actually, so continue is break. It terminates. it terminates the current block, but but stays in function, return it terminates the compiling. So compiling, so it terminates the compiling. Continue is nothing but continue, it skips the specific counter. Continue is going to skip the specific counter. How it works, I will show you. That means for that, I will take simple data here. Suppose we are having some data, where data, suppose it is products, is an array of objects. In that we have a name. So this is Samsung TV, and we have category. Category is electronics, and we have another name. Suppose, so we have Nike casuals, and we have category. Category is some footwear, like this. And we have another name, some mobile, and category. Category is, this is also electronics. So we have like this some options like jeans, and category is some fashion. Now what I want is, I want here to display electronics and fashion. That means I need to get only electronics and fashion and display. If you remembered, we learned array related find and filter methods. We can have a find method or a filter. By using array find and filter methods, we can manage. But important is here, find and filter, they use a condition. Based on that, they will get the value. Here, simple logic is for where item of products. We are reading every product. Now here we are writing a condition. If item dot category is equal to, if item category is footwear, then what we do is we just put continue. That means if the condition is matching, it will not consider it, it will skip it. What continue will do? Continue is not going to consider it, it is going to skip it. That means wherever the category is footwear, it will skip and it will go to the next one. So continue is used to skip the counter. Now we will print document dot write item dot name. We are printing name of all other items. Now you see it is going to print, so Samsung mobile and gyms. Wherever footwear is there, it skips. That means wherever footwear is there, continue means it skips the counter and continues. You can have multiple conditions. Suppose I want to skip fashion also, then you can write item dot category is a footwear, or item dot category is equal to what? Fashion. That means it will ignore both of them and only electronics will come. Right? That means what continue can do is, wherever this encounters, it skips them and continue to the next. So continue is going to skip the specific counter. It skips the specific counter and continue to next. So break will stop there. Suppose if I say, so break, that means whenever footwear comes, it will stop. Then it is not going to read this electronics then. So continue means wherever footwear comes, ignore. Then continue to electronics. Wherever again fashion comes, ignore. So to skip any counter, so we have to use this continue. This is example for that. So generally when you are reading elements, We don't want all. For example, you see, I want all employees with the designation only admin. So, or I want to ignore admin and pull up all employees. That means then we will write a simple if designation is admin, then continue. That means it will skip them and it will continue to the next. So for that, we have to use this continue. These are jump statements. These are jump statements, how we can use break, return, and continue. Right. Next important, after understanding jump statements, another is exception handling statements. Actually, in JavaScript, exception handling statements are not required when you are working with HTML. If JavaScript is used in Node.js server side or somewhere else separately, then exception handling is good. Otherwise, with HTML, exception handling is not satisfying. It doesn't make much sense also. Why? Because I will tell you why with HTML exception handling is not great. So what is exception handling is generally in computer programming, so errors are classified into two types. We have compile time errors and we have runtime errors. Errors are two types. Compile time errors means compile time errors are the errors related to keywords, syntax, blocks, etc. That means blocks means scope, etc. That means compile time errors means they are related to keywords, they are related to syntax, they are related to blocks and scope. That means what happens is, so program fails to compile and run. Due to these errors, program will fail to compile and run. That means, for example, I return for I is equal to 0, I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus, like this. That means this is invalid. So invalid keyword that is for, because it should be for. These are syntax errors. For example, I return for, so I is equal to 1. So, and I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. That means it says this is invalid separator. So that means comma is not there. You have to use a semicolon. These are all syntax related errors. So technically, when these errors will come, what will happen? Program fails to compile. It will not compile. That is compile time errors. That means your program will not start if there are compile time errors. So what are runtime errors? Runtime errors are the errors that occur. So while using application. That means program compiles successfully. There are no problems, but unable to handle various interactions, unable to handle few interactions. Then it is called runtime error. That means, for example, I said where x equal to 10 and where y is equal to suppose 0. And where z is equal to x divided by y. Means now here, can we divide a number with number? We can divide a number with a number. That is not a problem. So will it compile successfully? It will compile successfully, no problem. But it cannot run successfully. At runtime, problem will come. It says that according to mathematics, you cannot divide anything by 0. So then I can't do this operation. Is there any syntax error? No. There is no syntax error. Program failed to compile? No. Program successfully compiles. But it is unable to execute. Why unable to execute? Because you are doing which is not understandable to compiler. Compiler unable to understand certain statements. That means it is working. Until you give 0, it is working. That means this program is working for division. But suddenly once you give y0, then it fails. Is it every time failed? It is not every time failed. Only at a certain situation it will fail. These type of errors are called as runtime errors. That means you are using a software. It is working fine. After few days, due to some technical reasons, it stopped. It's hanging up. It is closing automatically. That means there is no fault in your application. What happened is there is fault in your operation. Understood? If it is working all these days, suddenly why it stopped? If it is working all these days, suddenly why it stopped? If it is having a problem, it should stop first time itself. That means few days it worked, after that it stopped. Then what is problem? Problem is not in your application. Problem is in your operating. Problem in your operating. If there is a problem in your operating, then suddenly application stops working. Then you have to find out what problem in operating, means which operation it is unable to handle. That means all these days it worked, but at certain stage it is unable to take my instructions. That means you need to identify that problem. Identifying compile time problem is easy. Compiler will report. Identifying runtime problem is difficult. So runtime problem is difficult because what is the situation, what values provided, it have to track everything. That is the reason in software programming, if any runtime error occurs, due to runtime error, what will happen is application suddenly closes. That means if compile time error happens, what will happen? Program will not launch. That means so application will not start. Application will not start if it have what errors? Compile time errors. Compile time errors. Application will start. Application will start, but terminates abnormally. But terminates abnormally if it have what errors? Runtime errors. Terminate. So to avoid abnormal termination, we need exception handling. If anybody asks in interview why we need exception handling, then only simple answer: exception handling is required to avoid abnormal termination. Exception handling is used in software programming for avoiding abnormal termination. What is abnormal termination? Abnormal termination means application suddenly closes. Why it suddenly closes? Because you given some instructions which are not understandable. Are all instructions not understandable? No. Only certain type of instructions are not understandable. Generally, we call these kind of issues as bugs. So we need to report those bugs. We need to fix the bugs. I hope you know, in the history of computing, in the history of computers till now, the largest bug we faced is the largest bug we faced is Y2K. Y2K is the largest bug in computer history. Even today, it is the largest bug, means till today. So Y2K, this bug came in year 2000. That bug came in year 2000. This is the largest bug in computing history. That means we used computers, but suddenly when we were nearing 2000 year, then we identified that problem. Actually, problem is this bug is related to dates. For example, so date is like this: 12 and 31, some December, and so we have 99. That is year. So month, day, and year. Now, what happens is next day it is changing to 1, 1, and 100. After 9900 only now. Right? Because 1 increment is happening after 9900 only. How a computer knows that after 99 2000 will come? That is completely baseless. Right? After 9900 should come. It is not 1999. If it is 1999, then 2000. It is actually 99. Then it is turning to 100. This was the problem we faced. This is the biggest problem. So Y2K in year 2000, when means up to 2000 we were using computers. Then just 1 year before, some person identified this problem and he asked others like, what will happen now? Then everybody started understanding this issue, and they found that this will be a very big issue. Why? Because stock markets, banking applications, they will reset the years, and all the calculations these days they have done, everything will reset to 0. Then what they have to do in every software operating system, they have to change the date format from 2 digits to 4. So that means everybody have to change. Means in the history of computers, whoever used computer, they have to update this. That means till now, such problem is not there. Even today, we don't have such problem that everybody have to update. Actually, ransom came 4 years, 5 years back. I hope you know. Ransom is the another biggest bug came. When ransom bug came, people thought that we have to stop using computers. But ransom bug means data leakage. Actually, ransom is related to data leakage. So that is the reason it is a very dangerous bug. Actually, data leakage is nothing but your entire information is broadcasted to others. Your entire information is sent to others. Everybody can access. That is the reason Facebook and Facebook majority actually. Facebook people have officially announced that we are not responsible for any kind of data leakages. They officially announced. That's the reason these days you see, because of that ransom bug only, many people try to clone your accounts. You will see people cloning your accounts. That means they are able to access everything about your account, clone your account with same profile photo and anything. You see many people sending these days, and many people put in status that somebody cloned my account asking money, right? So that is because of ransom virus. Ransom, that is the biggest bug, right? But people are not worried about that because Facebook have updated a small a plugin into it. That plugin allows to lock the profiles. Earlier, we don't have that. Earlier, locking profile is not there. On Instagram or Facebook, everybody can watch others' profiles. But after that ransom only, they introduced locking profile. right? You may not know all this technically what is happening in the background, but these are all bugs. These are all bugs. So runtime issues will come. That means, is there any problem in Facebook? There is no problem in Facebook, but some loopholes are identified and which are explored, and hackers use them. For that, what Facebook have to do, again, they have to design a new plugin and put that as a security, so that it will not allow others to explore your content. Otherwise, earlier, everybody can search any profile on Facebook and watch his photos without becoming a friend. But now it says your account is private. You cannot access. That is because of all this. So runtime errors are dangerous. They lead to abnormal termination. Okay, now what is point here is, so many days you are using JavaScript, you are writing JavaScript programs, you are designing several examples. All these days, anytime, have you faced the issue like the browser suddenly closed because of JavaScript code you written? All these days you are working with HTML and all. Have you ever faced the problem of browser suddenly closed because of the code you written, not because of your system busyness? Sometimes your system is busy, lot of browsers are open, then it hangs up. That is not the point. Because of the JavaScript code you written, HTML code you written, it is unable to compile that and suddenly browser closed. That never happens. That never happens. That means abnormal termination in HTML never happens. Then why you need exception handling? Then we don't need exception handling. So exception handling is not required, especially if JavaScript is working with the HTML. Exception handling is required if JavaScript is individually used. If any technology is using individually JavaScript, then exception handling is required. Otherwise, not required. See here, why you need exception handling? Because see, suppose I said var x equal to 10, var y equal to 2. So var z is equal to x divided by y. Document dot write. So document dot write. So here z is equal to the value of z. Now you can see it is going to print the result here 5. I am dividing by 0. Is it possible to divide by 0? No. If any other technology, it is Java, C++, .NET, immediately their program will close. Their program will immediately close. It says that it cannot divide by 0. But see, in JavaScript and HTML, it is not closing. It is simply showing some infinity. If application is not closing, what is the problem? There is no problem. Just you have to check condition. If y is 0, then put a message saying that don't use 0, or say that value must be above 0, right? That means we don't need exception handling. This is the problem in other languages. Suppose you are using C, C++, Java, .NET languages. There your program closes. Program will not run successfully. Program closes. So here it is not a problem. Then why you need exception handling? We don't need exception handling. So actually, exception handling is required to avoid what? Abnormal termination. But generally, HTML will not terminate the page if there is a problem in script. It will not terminate. So then, hence exception handling is not required. So you have to use exception handling. If JavaScript is individually used, then you need exception handling. Here also you can use exception handling, but you will feel like it doesn't make any sense. Why? Because see, how to use exception handling. Actually, exception handling statements are, we have try, we have catch, we have throw, and we have finally. Try is nothing but, try is called monitoring block. Monitoring block means it contains statements to execute. Catch is called handler block. That means what it will do is it catches the problem. So it catches the problem. What problem occurred while executing statements? So it will catch that problem. And the throw is, it is used to throw the problem. That means so if a problem is not reported internally, we have to throw it explicitly. Internally problem is reported, then it's okay, we can catch it. If internally problem is not reported, we have to throw the problem and tell. And in JavaScript HTML combination, every time you have to throw, means internally it will not catch the problem, then no use, useless. So we use this when we are using JavaScript separately with Node.js or other server-side technologies, or independently. With HTML, we don't prefer. So majority in front-end HTML, JavaScript, very rarely you will see exception handling statements anybody writing, right? So I will show you. Finally means it contains statements. It contains statements to execute always. Statements to execute always. So here I will show you a simple point. See, what are the statements to execute? These are the statements to execute. Then I will put in a try block. Try block contains the statements to execute. Okay. After executing these statements, that means this also statement. These are all the statements to execute. Okay, try. Now, if there is any problem in these statements, then what should happen? Catch. We have to catch. Catch uses a function. What this catch function can do is, it can catch the error. If any line is unable to execute, it will catch that error. I will just keep here as error, right? You can write error, or we call it as exception. It will catch the exception. This parameter name you can give anything, A, B, C, D, anything. I will give exception. That means if any problem occurred in executing any of these lines, then it will catch and it will report. Document.write, it have to report that exception. What problem occurred? It should report. And we have finally. Finally contains the statements to execute. That means I will put this in finally. Finally means result should be printed finally. Like this we are defining. Now what happens here is, you see, when I run this, so when we are running this, it will show 5. Now I am giving 0. Then obviously this line should unable to work, because we cannot divide by 0. If any software program unable to execute a line, why it is unable to execute a line? It will catch that. And it will store that message in EX. And that message will be printed. But our JavaScript cannot catch. If it cannot catch, then what is use? Time waste. You can see here, I refresh, it is unable to catch. Then what we have to do? We have to throw the problem manually. How to throw the problem? See, we have to write like this. If y is equal to 0, then what should happen? Throw. We have to throw a message saying that cannot divide by 0. This message we have to give. That means you have to throw the problem and you have to catch the problem. That is not satisfying. In other programming languages, it will catch the problem automatically. You don't need to throw the problem. But now we have to throw the problem and catch the problem. Now you can see it shows that cannot divide by 0. Cannot divide by 0. And I will put a BR. So because, and cannot divide by 0, and it shows undefined. Now if I put here as 2 or 3, now it is able to execute. So if it is not defined 0, then it says cannot divide by 0, Z is undefined. That means I'm printing that Z value always. I'm printing that Z value always. Finally means every time it will print that. Problem occurred, problem not occurred. Every time I want to print to see what is there. Now, is it able to catch the problem automatically? No. We have to throw the problem and catch the problem. Then why to use this? Simply write a if condition. You simply write a if condition and say that you cannot divide by 0. If y is 0, you cannot divide by 0. No need to write try, catch, throw, finally and all. But this is required in further stages. If you are using JavaScript independently, in technologies like Node.js, server side, or Angular or React like technologies, separately if you have to deal with exceptions, then you have to use this technique. Otherwise, with HTML, no use. Everything you have to report. For example, see, I am writing again if y is less than 0, then we have to say throw. So throw another message. So that means cannot divide by negative value. Like this, we are putting a message. So like this, we are defining. Suppose I am writing another condition. If y is greater than x, if y is greater than x, then throw a message. So number 2 large, like this. Now what happens here is I defined some 8, and you can see it divides and it will display. Suppose I am defining 18, then it says number 2 large. Number 2 large. This BR I will add so that another one will print. It says number 2 large. Suppose I am giving a negative value. So negative value. Then it says cannot divide by negative value. Suppose I entered some 0. Then it says cannot divide by 0. And you entered some correct value. Then it will return that correct resultant. So this you can do without exception handling. You can write simple conditions and you can verify the value. That means exception handling is not a great concept required, especially with the JavaScript using combination of HTML, because HTML pages will never terminate abnormally. They are not going to terminate abnormally. They will never terminate abnormally. Then what we have to do is we have to use the combination of other exception error handling. That means we don't use error handling. We use what? Exception handling. By using exception handling, we have to manage. So exception handling is required in other server side. Error handling is required in HTML. So two things you need to know. I will copy that. So what is that note is error handling is good for HTML. So exception handling is good. So is good for JavaScript. For JavaScript, so with server side or individually. So with HTML, it is not good. With HTML, it is not good to have that error. I hope you understood. These are all under the category of what? Exception handling. So if anyone asks what is exception handling and why we need exception handling, what is the purpose of exception handling? To avoid abnormal termination. Why application terminates abnormally? Because of runtime error. So what is difference between compile time error and runtime error? Compile time error is it fails to compile the application and start the application. Runtime error compiles the application, runs the application, but unable to handle specific tasks. Other task it is going to handle, but at a specific task it fails. That is what actually error handling is. So these are all the types of statements you have to know. Statements. So what are the statements? Summary I will give. So the statements we have selection statements, we have looping statements, we have iteration statements, we have jump statements, and we have exception handling statements. These are all different types of statements. Now, once you know about these statements, how to work with them, now in JavaScript, so you have to learn about another major concept, functions. So we need to know another important functions. Technically, what is a function, how to work with function. All these days we were using, but we don't have a good idea on that, correct idea. We are just using, right? All these days we are writing one function, we are calling the function without knowing the correct concept about it. Actually, what is a functions? Actually, function is used for refactoring the code. Function is used for refactoring the code. So what is the concept of refactoring? That means a function is used for refactoring the code. So refactoring is nothing but actually refactoring is the process of encapsulating a set of statements and extracting into one function or file. That is called refactoring. It is the process of combining a set of statements and extracting them and keeping under the reference of one name. So that is what actually refactor. Generally, I will show you. See, suppose you are writing some JS file. Let's create a JavaScript file. So let's add one JavaScript file. Scripts, okay. And just I'm adding temporarily one JavaScript file demo.js. I'm writing here some statements, document.write, or I'm writing simply for where I is equal to 1, I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. and document dot write. So it have to print the value of I. Now these are the lines we are having. So these are 4 lines code is there. I want to reuse these 4 lines again and again. If I want to reuse the 4 lines again and again, you see simple here. Select those 4 lines and right click on those lines. Right click on those lines, and you will find there is an option called refactor. You can see there is an option called refactor. We have refactor. Now when I select refactor, right click and select refactor, then automatically it will ask, do you want to extract to a function or move to a file? We want to extract to a function. Then it is will asking function name. Function name is print numbers. Automatically you can see. Now what happens? A function is created by name print numbers. In that all the statements are kept, and it will call that function here. What is advantage now? We can access this and use any number of times. So I want to print numbers. Then what we will do? We will access print numbers. So what is refactoring? Actually, all these days you are not doing this. You are just directly writing a function. But if there are so many lines you already written and later you want to use them, then you don't need to delete and write one function, paste inside it. Just you can select and you can say refactor. But unfortunately, this refactor is not directly available if you are writing in HTML page. So refactoring is available only when you are writing JavaScript in a separate file. If you are writing JavaScript in HTML page, right click refactor will not come. Only in JavaScript file it will come. That's the reason all these days what I done, we written manually a function. In that we written some statements. Otherwise we should have used refactor. That means in the beginning itself you might have known about refactoring. So if anybody asks what is the purpose of a function, so simple, function is technically used for refactoring the code. What is advantage? That means you can reuse. You can reuse the code without rewriting the code. Actually, we have to follow a simple principle action. That means generally in software development, already I told you once that we have to follow a principle called DRY. DRY means don't repeat yourself. That means in any real-time project, we should never see a set of lines written again. So that means you written 2 lines at one place. Those 2 lines should not repeat anywhere else. That is not good programming. Then without rewriting those 2 lines again, how to access them? By using these techniques, refactoring technique. That is what actually function. How the function works actually. So every function comprises of 3 specifications. Every function contains 3 specifications. One is declaration, another one is signature, another one is definition. Every function contains 3 things: declaration, signature, and definition. That means, for example, you see here we have a function details, and in the function details we have some product some product I am defining like this. Now, actually, in this, what happens is this is a function details product. This part, the function name and its parameters and the function keyword, this part is called, this is called declaration. This is function declaration. And only the function name and its parameter, this is called as, we call this as signature. Signature, function signature. And what functionality it performs, that is the functionality it performs, this is called definition. Definition. So every function have three specifications: declaration, signature, and definition. In order to access any function, we need its signature. That means wherever you want to access the function, what we have to do? We have to access what? Details. Details. And into that we have to pass some values. This is signature. That means by using the signature of a function, we access the function and use it. So every function contains three phases. One is declaration, another one signature, another one definition. So what is declaration? So that means function, so name, params. This is called actually declaration. Declaration. Name and params, this is called signature. Signature. And we have the block written like this. This is called definition. Definition. That is the function related three specification. And very important is, so example I will give you here, syntax, function, so name and parameters, and we define like this. This is what it works. Now, first thing you have to know about this is parameterized, parameterless, and parameterized function. Actually, so function can be parameterless. So, or parameterized. That means it can have parameters. What is the purpose of parameter? What is the purpose of parameter? Passing the value, providing the value, that is not the purpose of parameter. Parameter, why we need a parameter? Means you are telling to pass values. Passing values you will do when there is a parameter. Right? Our question is, why we need a parameter? Generally, function parameters, that means parameterless function performs same operation every time. Parameters are used to modify function. Parameters are used to modify function. That means a parameter can modify the function, to change the function. So without parameter, it will do same. For example, see, suppose we have this file. So add a new file, functions. Okay. So here actually we are having a script. And here we are defining parameters. So suppose function print numbers, and for where I is equal to 1, I less than or equal to 10, I plus plus. Now document dot write I plus br. Okay, now you can call that print numbers. When I call this print numbers, it is going to print 10 numbers here. Run this. It is going to print 10 numbers and display there. It is printing 10 numbers. 10 numbers it is printing. If I call again print numbers, it will print again 10 numbers. But I want to print only 4 numbers. Another situation, I want 40 numbers. Then for every purpose will you create a function? We cannot. Then what we do is, we can modify the function by passing a parameter. Here we will say how many. That means now how many is a parameter, and I less than how many? Less than how many? That means what? Now whenever I call print numbers, I need to tell how many numbers to print. Suppose I want to print 4. That means now the function is modified to print 4 numbers. I asked, so again print numbers. This time I asked 10. Then it will again print numbers 10. That means the function is same, but every time it is not doing the same work. It is changing the functionality according to the situation. And who is responsible for modifying the functionality? Parameters. So the purpose of parameters in any computer technology is to modify the functions. Their parameters are used to modify the functions. So now important here is, in this generally, the parameter that you pass in the declaration. You see, in the declaration, you are passing a parameter, right? This parameter that you pass in the declaration, this parameter is called, formal parameter. It is called formal parameter. And the parameters, values that you pass. So while calling the function, you pass the parameter. Actually, this is called actual parameter. So we have formal parameters and we have actual parameters. The parameters which are defined in the declaration, they are called formal. And the parameters that are passed while calling the function, they are called actual. These actual parameters are stored in formal. That means in which reference 4 is stored? 4 is stored in how many? So how many is a variable, and in that variable this 4 is stored, and it is used here. So generally, when you are defining the parameters, that means parameters are to modify function. So parameters defined in declaration are known as formal parameters. And parameters defined while calling function are known as actual parameters. And important, based on how many parameters a function takes. Based on how many parameters a function takes, we generally call function as with arguments. Arguments. That means how many parameters it will take. Based on that, we will tell that it is taking 2 parameters. We will say that pass 2 arguments. Understood? That means based on how many parameters it takes, we generally call that as how many arguments to provide. And the arguments that are provided are called as actual values. Arguments are actual values. That means perfectly calling them formal parameter, actual parameter. Sometimes people call arguments. Arguments means compiler terminology is arguments. Compiler will not say that parameter missing. Compiler will say that argument is missing. That means for a compiler, parameter is treated as a argument. So for compiler, parameter is argument. That means if you are not passing them, then it is a problem. That means you are not passing an argument. That means if it is mandatory, because in JavaScript, so they are not mandatory usually. How they can be optional and all, I will tell you here. Actually, you see here, it is printing 10. It is not taking this one. But generally, why it is not taking this one? Because it can ignore. Default, it can ignore. We learned JavaScript is not strongly typed. If it is not strongly typed, it cannot have restrictions by default. You have to set the restrictions. Generally, in other programming languages, what it will say, argument missing. Argument missing. How many arguments are missing? 1 argument. That means compiler treats these parameters as what? Arguments. So why you need a parameter? So a parameter is required for modifying the function. This is example. And what kind of parameters we can have? How many parameters we can have? There are so many things that we'll see tomorrow. Right? Tomorrow entire session will be on functions because it's a very big concept. And in interviews also, lot of questions are asked on functions. JavaScript front-end developer questions means several questions are asked related to functions very much in JavaScript. So you should know about them, right? That we'll see in tomorrow's session, right? Yeah.